He stole the show of the 2025 NFL Draft, not because of his analysis of the 256 other players.
Yeah.
It was of the one, his constant defense of the prospect named Shedeur. So what do you get whenever the most surprising the slide happens across the NFL Draft, in the history of the NFL Draft? You get Mel Kiper on a just mental, can we call it breakdown?
He was really going through it.
I mean, he was feeling...
It was a slow, steady decline over the course of those 3 days where he was heartsick, and it was getting worse and worse. As that free fall continued for Shedeur Sanders, it took its toll on Mel.
Like, how many stages are there for mourning? You know, there's like acceptance.
7 stages of grief, right?
Grief, yeah. So he went through
acceptance and all of the, eventually acceptance.
You're angry.
Denial, anger.
Yeah, sadness.
We saw all of them.
I mean, it was something.
I mean, we saw all of them in one exchange almost. He went through the gamut of all 7 parts of the 7 steps. It's 5 or 7. I don't know. Whatever the number was, he went through all of them.
He did. He counted them down. And look, we received ESPN's most famous draft pundit just losing it here. And he stole the show of the 2025 NFL Draft, not because of his analysis of the 256 other players.
Yeah.
It was of the one, his constant defense of the prospect named Shedeur. And I mean, he was able to reach his breaking point over the audacity that every NFL franchise passed up on the opportunity to draft him 143 consecutive times before the Browns made the call in the 5th round, making him the 7th quarterback selected in the draft, quarterback selected ahead of him. Of course, Cam Ward. We know Jackson Dart. We discussed this on Friday with the Giants trading back in to pick 25. Tyler Shuck as well with the Saints in the 2nd round. Jalen Milroe with the Seattle Seahawks. Okay. I mean, that was discussed going into the round 1. Would Milroe be selected ahead of him? In fact, there were others. Dylan Gabriel.
Shocker.
Dylan Gabriel, who is, I mean, we'll get into this coming up. He was graded, and the feedback, his agent even admitted they were hoping to become a 5th or 6th round pick. And the Browns made him a 3rd round pick at 94 overall. And then there was Shedeur Sanders, headed to the Cleveland Browns as well. Can't get enough quarterbacks. Pick 144 in the 5th round. Chad, you were watching this live as it happened. Mel Kiper, let's see, Louis Riddick, and who was the other? Reese Davis. Reese Davis also on set. And you sent
Field Yates was on set too, but he remained quiet. He was to the right of Mel Kiper. I think Field was really fearful of saying anything to just set off Mel even more, so he just kind of let it happen while he was looking at his computer monitor the whole time. He stayed quiet during the back and forth.
Let's hear part 1 of the meltdown.
This is not about can you play the position. This is about do we want you to play the position for us. That's what this came.
Why wouldn't they, Lou?
Well, look, that's a whole other discussion that we've had in many different ways for weeks and months now.
This is not one of the toughest quarterbacks you've ever.
But Mel, this isn't about. This isn't about quarterback traits and quarterback characteristics, personal football character. That's not about this. This is personal.
Has he had an off the field issue? No, he has not.
Mel, you don't have to sell it to me.
We know has he had an off the field issue? No, he has not. But then Reese Davis and Louis Riddick explained to Mel Kiper that the NFL decides the fate of Shedeur Sanders in the draft, not Mel Kiper Jr.
No, but I don't know what we're talking about here.
You're right. You're right.
Yes.
You're right. But you know what? But Mel, the draft has spoken.
That's right. That's the key, Mel. It's not putting a value judgment on whether those who passed were right or wrong. They did.
Yep.
So now, whenever you're in circumstances in life, whether you like them, whether you don't like them, whether they're fair or whether they're unfair, you might have to deal with them.
That's
and
right.
now Shedeur Sanders has to deal with
everything.
And for whatever reason, whether he played a minute, microscopic percentage, 0%, or it's a legitimate criticism of the way he conducted himself during the draft process, this was the result.
Well done, Reese Davis.
Reese Davis was very good.
That was awesome. And, I mean, setting up what is now the 3rd part of the rant. Mel Kiper, who had...
it doesn't end.
It doesn't end. Mel Kiper, who had Will Levis atop his board last year as the top quarterback. Levis drops to the second round to the Titans. He also has Shedeur.
Well, he also had Mitch Trubisky way ahead of Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
He's had a lot of gaffes when it comes to quarterback evaluation.
And so have NFL teams.
Yeah, he's not alone. Everyone who covers the draft or is a draftnik has had bad evaluations. But just like every NFL team has.
But Kiper wants to point to, again, it's not his or Shedeur's fault.
Well, I mean, I think yelling at the NFL about it is not
a quarterback. Boomer Esiason was not happy when he was a second-round pick.
Tom Brady was not happy.
They dropped. How'd they turn out?
And you know what?
My point,
nobody's arguing that can happen.
Reese, the NFL has been clueless for 50 years when it comes to evaluating quarterback. Clueless. No idea what they're doing in terms of evaluating quarterback. That's proof. There's proof of that. They say we know exactly what we're talking about with quarterback. They don't.
They then have to begin consoling Mel Kiper. Again,
By the way, Peyton Manning was the number 1 overall pick. Turned out pretty well.
Yeah,
but we can also point out there are NFL situations where they drafted a guy very high and he went on to be a great player, or he was the first quarterback off the board.
I'd say it's roughly 50-50.
In the interest of fairness on this show, I do want to point out that what Mel Kiper's saying about 50 years of quarterback problems with evaluations across the league isn't true in every instance.
Now, the bar is set very high. Most of the time, the quarterbacks fail because the bar is set so high for greatness, right? If you're drafted that high. But Will Levis, Shedeur Sanders, and Kiper's losing it, and he continues because the guys on set are having to console, let him know, like, hey, chill. Tony Gwynn didn't bat 1,000, neither does Mel Kiper Jr.
They're almost having two different conversations during this clip.
Nobody's batted 1,000 there, though.
That's correct.
Right? I mean, I think that's...
All that matters now is what happens going forward. We talk about it all the time. There is the evaluation phase, there's the evaluation and selection phase, which we're in right now, and then there's the development and implementation phase. That's where we're heading to right now. That's all that matters for him. Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry,
and Lou.
Have at it.
Quarterbacks now, and Reese, you know as well as anybody, college kids now get paid. They're professional. They're getting paid. They're commercials. They're out there. You got to deal with that. If you're the NFL, you got to deal with that.
I don't know where that came from or why that mattered. And Reese Davis, he's reached his final straw.
Okay, he's saying whatever he's saying behind closed doors. What's he saying? I want to be the guy. I should be this. I should be that. Deion saying he's the best player in the draft. He's best quarterback, second best to Travis Hunter. Best quarterback. Who is it? What quarterback out there didn't think they should have been a high first-round pick?
Again, nobody's criticizing what happened. We're saying he has to deal with the reality of the results from it.
Correct.
That's all. Pick 140 Shedeur Sanders. Everybody wishes him well, as we do.
I will say, it's the first time I've heard anyone actually try to argue the other side of things, where it's like the NFL will actually determine Shedeur Sanders' fate, and he's not that good. I didn't hear that. Not fifth round level. I'm stunned by his fall. And I believe he's much better than a fifth round selection in the draft. But Kiper is clearly, I mean, you can tell he is embarrassed by this.
It's personal.
He's embarrassed by the fact that
he feels personally attacked by the league.
I mean, well,
that's what it came across to me. The entire league is disrespecting Mel Kiper by dropping his number 1 prospect and his number 1 quarterback to the 5th round. So now everyone's going to talk trash about me online. I'm going to go after the league for being terrible at evaluating quarterbacks, and this is a league problem, not a Mel Kiper, not a me problem.
As Cam Ward was walking across the stage after being selected number 1 overall, they're already discussing Shedeur Sanders, and they proceeded to do so for 3 days. It was great for ESPN. I mean, the ratings were massive. The day 2 draft broadcast was the largest since 2020, but that's one that may not be reached just based on everyone being at home during the pandemic. The NFL draft coverage that year was phenomenal. This is the second most since then, and it was Shedeur. It was Shedeur watch the entire time. It was fascinating. It's also just like, what the hell happened?
I happened to catch that whole thing the back and forth, and I didn't watch much on Saturday. That was Saturday.
Okay, so it's after he was drafted.
This was Saturday, right after he was drafted,
Gotcha.
probably 15, 20 minutes after. There are picks being revealed on the screen that they're not mentioning a word about, right, in the fifth round, because they're going to sit there and debate that. And look, this is not a summary judgment of ESPN's production decisions.
Right.
They did the right thing. All right, it showed. Like, people, we're still talking about Shedeur Sanders.
Yes.
His fall in the draft is the storyline coming from the 2025 draft. It always will be. This will be the Shedeur Sanders draft. We will discuss how that sort of negatively impacts Cam Ward, who got 1/20th the amount of talk of Shedeur Sanders, and he was the actual number 1 overall pick. Not fair to Cam Ward, but I want to give Mel Kiper his flowers on this a little bit. This dude stuck to the bit better than anyone I've ever seen. He was unwavering. He was ready and prepared, and in fact did die on the Shedeur Sanders is awesome at football, and there is no reason that anyone should ever question anything about him leading a franchise hill. He died on that bad boy, and I want to take my hat off and applaud you, Mel Kiper. In a day and age where people back down all the time from bad takes, you stuck with it. You're right there with it. If Shedeur Sanders goes on to have a Hall of Fame Tom Brady-like career as a 5th-round pick, this will forever not just be the Shedeur Sanders draft, it will be the Mel Kiper Jr. draft also. Because this guy crushed it with some compelling content over the course of the weekend.
Well, we should throw in Will Levis as well. If Will Levis goes on to where he does next.
Yeah, I don't really know what he's saying about Will Levis now today, but
well, he continues to say he still thinks he's a great prospect.
I'd be curious to see what we're saying about Shedeur Sanders later. Here's where, though, Mel Kiper is just, it's too different. This is why these conversations become cringeworthy at times, because I'm watching it. You're an outsider as the audience, watching two people talk about one thing and one person talk about something totally different. Like, those 3 men are not having the same conversation. What Reese Davis and Riddick are saying
and they're,
is not at all what Mel Kiper is talking about.
Well, but they haven't been discussing their end of this argument at all. Like, it's just, they're just as surprised.
Yeah.
But they're not embarrassed, and therein lies the difference in what they're doing.
I think this is what
you're right. It's hard to follow what they're.
It's hard to follow because the route Riddick was going on immediately gets interrupted by Mel Kiper saying, "Well, why? What? Name the off-field issues. Name the off-field incidents." And here is what Mel Kiper. This is where he fails in his argument. Is that Mel Kiper is using this summary lack of a rap sheet. Kid hadn't been arrested. Don't know problems with drugs or alcohol. Don't know problems with him hitting women or any of that. He's using that as, well, boy, if you don't have anything with that, then there's no reason at all to question the player. Just turn on the tape and watch it, and that's what you're going to find is a great player who's not going to be a problem. And what's the problem with him saying he's going to be great? Don't you want everyone saying that? And I get part of that. But, Hutton, this became football versus personality with Shedeur Sanders. The football part of it was why he wasn't a first-round pick. He wasn't a first-round pick because the NFL said you're not a starting quarterback right now in the league. Second round, rarely are quarterbacks drafted in the second round. Will Levis was a year ago, but that's them also saying you're probably not a first-round pick. So then the question becomes third round on, is he a backup who can develop into a starting quarterback? And I think that's where we move from the football to the personality. What team execs told us was, this guy is not going to be a good teammate when he's not the starting quarterback. If he has to compete,
and a distraction.
If he has to be a backup, he is exactly distraction with his branding. Is he going to demand 15 cameras following him everywhere he goes?
Right.
He's going to be a problem in the locker room. And if we're not saying that he's talented enough to be a day one starter in the league, then we're not going to want to bring him in, even if we think he has a chance to develop at some point, because he's going to be a distraction as a backup.
Well, and you draft your starters in the first round. You draft your backups on day 3. That's generally what general managers tried to do. I did find it surprising that Cleveland decided to draft him.
It was shocking that Cleveland, the drafting of Dylan Gabriel was more shocking than drafting Shedeur Sanders. If they don't draft Dylan Gabriel, I'm thinking, all right, I get it. You don't really have a quarterback. You're taking a flyer on a guy that if he is a terrible locker room presence, you can cut him. So I totally get it, and I'm fine with that. But it's the Dylan Gabriel followed by Shedeur Sanders. By the way, that night, Barry is talking about Shedeur Sanders when asked a question about him, and then the next day drafts him on his Friday night.
So Andrew Barry admits that he did not go into to Saturday expecting to draft a second quarterback. He admits that. That to me is a Jimmy Haslam decision.
Yeah.
You could see it on their.
That's a good point.
Like he admitted that after they drafted Shedeur, and you could see it on their faces whenever they draft him. I say all that to go back to your point on the personality and the traits and so. I understand where Kiper's bringing this up because generally, if you're falling down the charts and you're having this massive slide, it's because of an off-field issue.
Isaiah Bond wasn't drafted. Perfect example.
Isaiah Bond.
That guy's a second or third round pick. He went undrafted
exactly.
because of a recent sexual assault allegation.
Exactly. And so that's you can explain why he would slide off draft boards.
Yeah.
This was unexplainable. And it came down, and the reason for it is it's not just Kiper, it was everybody. I mean, and when I say I don't know, the draft analyst that had Shedeur ranked the lowest would have ranked him where? In the 30s of all prospects. In the 30s.
Yeah, like a second round
I didn't
grade.
see anybody with a 75 rating on him out of all, the 75th best player available. I saw 30. I believe it was Dane Brugler had him in the 30s. But everyone else was just kind of, going along with the show. And so was the rest of the NFL, quite frankly, until draft night. And then they showed us exactly what they thought. And even when he was drafted, here's the front office of the Cleveland Browns. This is their reaction. This is Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. When they go to the draft room announcing that they've selected Shedeur Sanders, look at them. I mean, there's no way they wanted to draft a second quarterback.
They look like they brought that back row of guys in from the other room and forced them to stand there and applaud.
Yeah.
It looks like a group that was just – it's like you're touring a building in New York, or you're touring 30 Rock, and they bring you in on the set of Rachel Ray, and you didn't know where you were going. You thought you were going to be at Fallon, and they bring you in. They're like, hey, clap at this person you never heard of on stage right now. That's what the group looks like.
That's it. And it's also the look on Barry's face right there is also the look we all had watching Mel Kiper's meltdown over 3 days.
It's incredible.
Shedeur watch was in full effect.
And here comes the other very predictable part of this.
Yeah.
Stephen A. Smith and others are claiming racism.
Well, Stephen A. saying it's being blackballed like Colin Kaepernick, calling it a disgrace. So here's Stephen A.'s tweet. It's a damn disgrace. How in the hell is Shedeur not off the board, not drafted yet? Y'all still think it doesn't have anything to do with teams hating on at Deion Sanders? Let me go back to that in a moment. This kid is a first rounder. In a different way, this is a Kaepernick all over again, being kept out. A damn disgrace. I don't care what anyone says. If it's about Deion Sanders, why did Travis Hunter get drafted number 2 overall? And why did Shiloh Sanders sign as an undrafted free agent with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? If it's about Deion. If it's about Deion, you don't bring Shiloh in, do you?
No.
And I mean, the player, the Heisman Trophy winner for Deion Sanders, we saw a team give an extra first-round pick for him. That has nothing to do with Deion. This was about father and son and how they approached this draft. And I am sitting here telling you, I believe Shedeur Sanders is a much better talent than what we saw over the weekend. Much better. We saw it for our own eyes when we all as a nation watched Colorado play on Saturdays. And then we all as a nation watched him slide down the charts because of the way they approached this draft. Not because he's black.
No.
Or because he's Deion Sanders' son. Now, Deion Sanders, because he's the father, had something to do with this. But if you're not about Deion, why bring in Shiloh as an undrafted free agent if you don't want the distraction? This has to do with the quarterback position and the fact that, he clearly approached certain interviews as if he already knew where he was going to go or was going to dictate where he was going to go. There's more to the story behind the scenes than what we saw, and there's clearly more to the evaluation than what we believed.
Yeah, totally not racist, obviously,
No.
with all that. It's a ridiculous argument. I will say there's one similarity here with Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick wasn't added to NFL rosters because 2 reasons. Every team did not think he was good enough to be a starter anymore at the time because he had flailed out with the San Francisco 49ers. And it's very similar to what Shedeur Sanders is facing right now because teams then looked at him and said, I guess he's better than our backup or our third string, just from a strictly play standpoint, which he was. But is it worth the headache? Is it worth the distraction when he continued to be an activist after that and everything else he was saying about Cuba and about the league and everything else? Is it worth the distraction to bring in a backup quarterback for that? These are the same questions that teams were asking about Shedeur Sanders.
Then the league had to hold their own little
for different
workout.
reasons, but similar thinking of if he's not good enough to be the starter, do we want to put up with it?
Yeah, you have a reality show following you around.
And you also need to have the personality for the job.
Well,
if I'm hiring a job in sales, I'm not going to hire someone who says, I really don't like talking to people face to face. Well, or I don't like talking to people on the phone.
I think the Shedeur and Shiloh love talking.
I'm not saying it. No. This is my point, though. If I'm hiring a damn backup quarterback to learn, to soak up the playbook, and to support the starter,
I don't know who's starting.
This is what I'm talking about. The comparison.
That's what's weird about the draft.
I'm not hiring someone in sales who can't speak. I'm not hiring someone as a backup that has a God complex and believes they are the best quarterback ever and is telling me that in interviews and that they're going to go and change the whole situation.
I don't hate the fact that he believes he's the best quarterback. And the Cleveland Browns just drafted him. I don't know who's starting in Cleveland. I think Shedeur's going to start games there.
Yeah.
Now, he's got to make the roster first, and it's got to be humbling. But we'll discuss the humbling factor coming up. Certainly Kiper's humbled. There are plenty of others, including yours truly. It's next here on Hot Mic.